Hello and welcome to Career STEM Chats. In this episode, you'll be hearing a chat between our host, Sarah Cardozo Duncan, and Yael Schwartz. Sarah Cardozo Duncan is a STEM career coach with a global client base. She's known for her strategic approach to career development and serves as a career coach in residence in both academia and biotech. Through her work with private clients, as well as workshops, webinars, and podcasts, she has helped guide professionals at all stages of their careers. Beyond that, Sarah has spent years building communities that support women in science. She currently advises New England graduate women in science and engineering and is the co-founder of Friends of Sarah, a confidential support network for PhD students and postdocs navigating difficult work environments. Dr. Schwartz earned her doctorate in endocrinology through a joint program between Worcester Polytechnic Institute's Biomedical Research and Engineering Department and the University of Massachusetts Medical School's Department of Physiology. She went on to complete postdoctoral research in cell biology and immunology at UMass Medical School, simultaneously serving as a visiting associate professor of biotechnology at WPI, where she taught human physiology and immunology. As an entrepreneur, she has led and built research and product development initiatives in women's health and medical dermatology, translating breakthrough science into real-world solutions. Beyond her executive leadership, Dr. Schwartz has served on numerous boards, including the Board of Trustees of the Massachusetts Biomedical Initiatives and as a co-founder of the New Eyes Club in Boston. Today, she remains a sought-after speaker at biotech events across the country and around the world, continuing to shape the future of life sciences through innovation, leadership, and impact. In this next segment, Sarah sits down with Dr. Schwartz and talks about the journey behind the achievements, the risks, the pivots, the breakthroughs, and what it really takes to bring science from the lab bench to the marketplace. Here's our interview with Dr. Yael Schwartz.
This is Dr. Yael Schwartz. She is presently the CEO of
Bridge Therapeutics.
Bridge Therapeutics, there you are, and has had one of the more fascinating careers, and certainly didn't come to science right away, if I recall, Yael.
That's correct.
So tell me about the beginning of the journey. How did that all happen?
Oh, well, Sarah, how far back would you like me to go?
Back, because
So,
our audience
I think
would be early career to mid-career people. So I think it would be good to go back to your early career days, your PhD days, and then bring us through that.
happy to do that.
Thank you.
I was a latecomer to the PhD program. Prior to that, I had been a psychiatric social worker and I worked at McLean Hospital. But prior to that, I was a biology chemistry major. And the reason I went into social work was I was suddenly a young single mother and needed a way to make a living. And pursuing a biomedical degree would have taken more years than I thought I had to raise a child with financial resources behind me. Right. So I wanted to become a psychiatric social worker, and it turned out I did my training and my early work at McLean Hospital in Belmont. And I fell in love with the research that was going on in their neurology brain institute. Just completely fell in love with it. And I began to see the advent of new drugs that were being developed in collaboration with other universities. And I began to kick myself in the rear end and say, this is much more exciting than facilitating meetings with psychiatric patients and counseling them to leave and become self-sufficient. I thought science was much more exciting. And so I bit the bullet and went to Northeastern University and got a degree in pharmacology toxicology. And from there, I ended up working at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute on Beanie Street. Yes, and so back in those days, now we're talking about the early 1980s. Back in those days, the Dana-Farber was 4 floors of research connected by a bridge to the hospital and administrative building. That was really it. Well, today, when you go into Boston, you see how the Dana-Farber has grown and expanded. But my first exposure to being directly involved in drug development to make a safer, less cardiotoxic drug for cancer patients was at the Farber.
Ah,
And so I was encouraged at Northeastern University to pursue either an MD or a PhD degree. And so I worked a few more years and applied to a program between UMass Medical and Worcester Polytech, WPI, where I got my degree in human physiology and postdoc in immunology.
oh, how
Now, in those days, immunology was in its infancy. It's you know, I'm an much older person now, and I'm astounded at the developments around Boston and Cambridge in particular.
unbelievable,
It's unbelievable.
unbelievable. And then
So many bright young minds.
so many, so many.
So many. Yeah.
And the onset of technology.
Yes. So what was interesting about leaving UMass and going into industry, I remember after I finished, I did a very truncated postdoc because I was able to see what happened to people who couldn't find jobs. And I noticed they were doing 5-year postdocs, 6-year postdocs. Meanwhile, we had taken all of our classes at UMass Med with medical students, and they were out after 4 years and a couple of years in the clinic with a license to kill. I mean, I'm being facetious, but you know, they had a real career track. And the PhD students were kind of wandering around and doing a little work at the bench. And I said, well, this is absurd. So I told my advisors, I said, I'm going to go to industry. Oh, you would have thought I had threatened to.
Oh, you went to the dark. You went to the dark side.
That's exactly what they said. They said, you're going to the dark side. And one even said to me, are you sure you can make a living doing that?
An academic.
And my reply was, are you sure I can make a living walking up and down the hall with a test tube for $30,000 a year? I said, don't be ridiculous.
And off you went to industry.
That's right. I started at PowerXL, doing clinical phase 2 work on a cardiovascular drug. And then I went to work for a little company that was beginning in Marlborough, Mass, called Seprecor. I'd also interviewed at Pfizer, but it meant relocating. And it was just so big, and I felt so pigeonholed in a big environment. And when I talked to my would-be boss at Seprecor, I realized I would have an opportunity in a small company to do pharmacology, toxicology, clinical, learn regulatory. So I jumped right in.
Wow.
10 years.
It was an early decision for you.
It was
not an early decision, an easier decision for you.
It was an easier decision because your hours were really 9 to 5 or 6, unless you had a crunch. And that crunch would have been, you know, submitting an investigative new drug application or a new drug application, you know, on all hands on deck. Whereas my friends who remained in postdoctoral positions were working in the lab all hours of the night, and they had kids at home. Some of them had kids, and it wasn't the life that I wanted. And plus, you have no control over your destiny. You're depending on NIH grants. You know, so, for me, it was kind of a no-brainer. And it was at about that time that
I don't mean to interrupt, but how did you get that job at Seprecor? And how did you start, and where did you end up?
Well, I started as a junior
Science
scientist.
one.
You know, because I only had done one postdoc, and in reality, at least that company didn't care that you came out of academia. They wanted to know if you had real life skills that you could apply to developing a product. I had none. You know, I had worked at the Faber, but on a bench. You know, this was behind a computer and going to development meetings and troubleshooting things as they were rolling up the pipeline. And so I had no experience. So I think I started as a junior scientist and I ended up as a senior director.
Wow. In 10 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And how
how
did
are
I get
you
the job?
how are you able to get those, you know,
I get,
performance, good performance
I
reviews?
have to tell you, I worked for wonderful people.
Ah,
It's about the people you work with, and it's about showing up and working your job. I mean, that's what it's about. And if you do that, you'll be rewarded. That's been my experience. I worked for my immediate boss was a wonderful person. He was a former Navy SEAL, so there's no BS with those people. You know, you show up, you do your job, and I remember one interview I had with him before they gave me the job. He said, if you're supposed to be in a meeting at 9 a.m. and the meeting is supposed to go from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., and at 10 a.m. they still haven't finished with the meeting and they're rehashing the same business, what are you going to do about it? I looked at him and I said, I'm going to get up and leave. And he looked at me and he said, exactly.
exactly.
The military model.
Wonderful. And
Wonderful.
so you started to laugh when I asked you how you got that job.
Okay, so I'm sure I wasn't the most experienced, but I found out afterward, and I know this might upset some of the younger women who will listen to this podcast today, but when I was going through school, we put up with a lot of
Yes.
crap from a lot of men. You know, it was male dominated. And I found out after I got the job offer from one of the men who interviewed me, he said, you know why you got the job? And I said, why? And he said, well, you were easy on the eyes.
Oh, my goodness. And you looked at him and said, why, thank you, kind sir.
I looked at him and I said, oh, thank you so much, but I'm already taken.
Good answer. And then that 10 years at Sepulchre seemed to turn you into a serial entrepreneur.
It did, because that was a great job, because it wasn't big pharma. We had an opportunity to work across functional areas. I even ended up doing some work by guiding and mentoring and assisting the medical liaisons who were out in the field and the salespeople and helping them with their training. So I got to do virtually everything within a company. I got my hands involved in everything. And so by the time my time was up there, because the company was preparing to be sold to a larger entity, I thought, you know what? I think I might want to try my hand at starting a company. I mean,
that was very, very pioneering on your part as a female.
well,
maybe
you're just plain stupid. I don't know,
that could be too.
But I thought, you know, why not? There were little companies were springing up all over Boston and Cambridge. I had no idea where to begin. I had no idea who to talk to. There were no entrepreneurship courses you could take in those days, nothing at all. And so I kind of flew by the seat of my pants with my spiritual mentor was Jiminy Cricket, actually.
How so?
Well, because I grew up in the 1950s and Jiminy Cricket we used to rush home from kindergarten, first grade to watch Disney, right?
Yeah.
And Jiminy Cricket to me was always he was a sage, the sage with the umbrella and the top hat, but he was a bug, right?
Right.
So this bug, I remember as a kid, there were always interesting sayings that Jiminy Cricket had. And one of them was, if your heart is in your dream, no dream is too extreme.
Ah, and that was your mantra.
Yeah. And so if your heart is in your dream, no dream is too extreme, right?
Yes.
And so I had a dream in my mind, a kind of a weird carved out blueprint for a first company. And that's great, but that's not enough.
But
And
what did you base that on? I mean, what did you
well,
start a company around?
well, I'll tell you what I based it on. While I was at Sepulchre, myself and our pharmacokineticist were talking to the CEO and said to him, you could functionally change the directionality of metabolism by putting deuterium strategically on certain molecules. So, for example, if you were looking at a molecule that had a toxic metabolite, you could strategically place deuterium, which is heavy water, and shunt it away from forming the toxic metabolite and make it safer. And so we were laughed at by the CEO and by the CMO,
Of course.
of course, probably because I brought it to the table, a woman, and the pharmacokineticist was an older, overweight male.
So they said,
It was a lose-lose team right from the get-go. So I was talking to him and I said, it's actually a pretty good idea. Let's do it. And he looked at me and he said, are you out of your mind? And I said, we'll raise money. Meanwhile, we had exited. We had good stock options that had done well. And we went out and we put a little team together of people who were thinking of exiting the company at the time. And we started out with this idea, and only to find out, I'm sure that this is how it happened, that our CEO and his CMO were somewhere in Cambridge having a drink with other CEOs and happened to have a little too much and happened to say, you have a couple of these crazy employees who said, you could add heavy water and shunt away a toxic metabolite. Well, while they thought it was a stupid idea, someone in Cambridge didn't think so. And so when we started pulling together enough money and went out to visit venture capitalists, it all of a sudden dawned on us that venture capitalists who aren't scientists at all, most of them are not, were asking us questions that were way too detailed. And finally, because I have chutzpah, you know what that is,
yes.
Unmitigated gall.
Yes.
I said to this whole group of VCs, I said, guys, this is our fourth meeting with you. And in the first three, I didn't think any of you were chemically sophisticated. And so your questions seem to be more sophisticated than I would expect from people with MBAs. Who else are you looking at?
Oh.
They didn't answer. And I said to my team,
let's go.
We're not doing your due diligence. We're not doing due diligence for these people. Let's go. Well, it turned out another company did form based on the idea, but they came up with drug ideas that we never would have come up with. And what happened to that company? Didn't do so well. They raised tens of millions of dollars and produced nothing.
Nothing. And then?
So
what did you do with that? What did you do with that company at that point?
Well, we ended it. we ended it. We did raise a little bit of money, just to make sure we could get some provisional patents written and have money to travel to visit VCs, and that included going to New York. We ended it, and then quite interestingly, I got a call from a former colleague through the Endocrine Society from Yale University School of Medicine. It was on my home phone, who asked me if I thought if I knew of any company, or I thought the company, he didn't know it had left Sepulchre, if I knew of whether or not Sepulchre might be interested in some hormonal a hormonal agonist that would be safe to use in place of estrogen. And I said, no, I've left that company. I'm currently not working with anyone, but I'd like to come to Yale and visit your lab and see what you have. So I did. And I did a CDA, and I said, we can do something with this. And then the economy tanked. It was, I don't remember what
I know the year. I know it was 2000. I can't remember.
Yeah, and the economy tanked. So flat. No one was raising money. We didn't have jobs. And to quote Jiminy Cricket, I'm no fool, no siree, I'm going to live to be 93. So I told everybody we're still young. I said, let Jiminy Cricket be our guide.
I love it. I just love it. And then
they all said I was insane.
Well, that seems to be the common. It seems to be the common thread.
Yes, it's a common thread. So we persevered, raised some money, and tried to get investors to understand that currently marketed estrogens for intravaginal use were not safe in a certain subset of the population. And that would be women with histories of uterine and breast cancer. Who are these women? Nobody knows. And so if you can come up with a safer intravaginal estrogen that falls apart before it hits the system, then you have a winner. Well, of course, who are we talking to? Who are the venture capitalists? Yeah. Men. What do they know about vaginas?
Not very much.
Not very much. Exactly. And so what were they excited about? Erectile dysfunction. Already at that time, there were 2 drugs out there for it, right? So we did not do well with venture capital, but we raised a significant amount of money from physicians. And so that enabled us to move forward with this whole portfolio. When we licensed from Yale University, we ended up with 23 of these topical, rapidly biodegradable estrogenic compounds. And it enabled us to pick a lead and then a backup. And then all of a sudden we were at, again, you know what? It's a circuitous route in entrepreneurship. And then
it is, isn't it?
It's unbelievable. Yeah. And then we're at, it was Wyeth.
Oh my goodness.
And we ended up at Wyeth. They were very excited to talk to us. We walked in and I thought, wow, what a reception. We had business development people there. We had all these MDs, we had scientists. It was like, I felt like Queen Elizabeth walking in. I had this whole court of people. They were all there hanging on our words. And so we're talking about, when of course they had the Premier and mayors. It was making them a lot of money. So I wondered why there was such a crowd. And the head of business development said, we didn't want to cancel this for you, but today we finalized our merger with Pfizer.
Right, the Wi-Fi merger.
Talk about bad timing.
Oh, right? My goodness.
Terrible timing. However, they said they didn't want us to leave empty-handed. They really thought what we had was exciting. And one female physician looked at me and she laughed and she said, "You might be barking up the wrong epithelial surface." And I looked at her and I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Skin. Skin is where it's at." She said, "Don't waste your time with the FDA. You're not really a drug. You're an estrogen mimetic. Don't make a medical claim." She said, "Go out as a pharmaceutical, go after skin."
Oh, fabulous.
She said she said estrogen receptors are everywhere. So that's what we did. And in the meanwhile, we ended up in licensing a very interesting, again, nicely engineered topical anti-androgen for acne and alopecia. We brought that into the company. And all of a sudden, we were approached by a family office of two very high net wealth people. One of them was the founder of Celgene. And we formed a public company.
Wow. And if you
Yes.
could, that would be an interesting distinction between, entrepreneurial in a privately held company, although, investors that you had to, deal with, to a publicly traded company with a whole different set of rules.
Whole different set of rules, a whole different way of spending money. When you're private, you don't have to spend money on compliance issues. When you go public, and I helped them raise $60 million for Series A, when you go public, all of a sudden, a lot of money goes into a different barrel for compliance. And you don't have the flexibility to pump money into product development. And it turned out that the person I was asked to step down as CEO while they brought on a public company CEO. And that was interesting because apparently they didn't do any due diligence on him. Because when I did, I discovered that the last three companies he had CEO'd failed miserably.
But he was one of the boys?
Yes, and in fact, I did end up as the only woman on a public board of directors. I had to be, SEC approved. And I began to notice, and I think we've known one another long enough, Sarah, for you to know that I probably have the biggest balls in the room.
Yes. Check yes. Check yes.
Check that box. And so I began to notice right before meetings, would have an agenda, and that decisions seemed to be made before they were discussed at the level of the board. And so one day I got to a board meeting early and I noticed all the men, 4 of them, went into the men's room. And I thought, what would Jiminy Cricket do?
Go into the men's room.
And Jiminy Cricket would have said, remember, always let your conscience and your heart be your guide. So what did my conscience tell me to do? And my heart was get in the men's room.
Yeah.
So I walked into the men's room and I said, I didn't realize we were having a meeting in here today.
Yeah.
The chair of the board said, you can't be in here. And I looked at him and I said, I went to medical school. Don't worry about it. I've seen it before, only bigger.
Oh my goodness. And
well, I looked at them and I said, seriously, gentlemen, there are to be no decisions made in my absence. I may only be 1 out of 5 votes, but my vote matters. And I don't like it that when you show up, to the meetings. It's you've already made a decision without any discussion.
And a
I
reaction.
said, we have shareholders and we have a fiduciary responsibility to them to have real meetings with real discussion that shows up in real minutes, not covered in urine. Bingo.
And that was the last time those decisions were made in that particular room?
That I'm aware of. I do know none of them were golfers, so that was covered.
Good. Good.
So, long story short, that company, as predicted, under the leadership of the CEO they hired, failed. And when I saw what was happening, I told them that I expected that they would, because they made bad decisions. And I warned them, I said, I'm on record having voted against 95% of those decisions. I'm not expecting to go down with the ship. So I'm asking you nicely now to give me back all of the assets I brought to this company in their current development stage, and to send me off with a nice golden umbrella so I can start another company without any of you in it.
And they did.
They did. They did. And so that company is now Organics. So there we go. That's my
Wow.
my dirty little entrepreneurship story.
Oh no, I think it's so encouraging. And so, you talked about, accepting failure, learning from failure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Learning at Seprecor, that 10 years that really gave you the foundation of being able to open and understand how industry works, and basically biotech, as you said, you covered all of the different areas of business. There wasn't, including sales.
And there was one valuable thing, and it wasn't that someone said to me, this time it wasn't Jiminy Cricket, but I wish I could remember who it was. I remember what was said to me, and it was from an executive leader around Boston. And what he said, and I'm going to paraphrase, was, don't be someone when you talk about your company. Don't try to be someone you're not. He said, people will always recognize a phony.
Yeah.
Be yourself, even if people don't want to hear what you have to say. Be genuine. If they don't want to hear it, that's on them.
Right. I love it.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that was almost Jiminy Cricket.
Jiminy Cricket, who's been your guide, and I know exactly what question to end on. It'll be a Jiminy Cricket question for sure, Yael. I just wanted to say, that building from knowing that you didn't want to be stuck in a lab in a postdoc position for 6 years. I think you had a contract with your PhD.
I had government money. And so I finished the project and then I left. And of course, a lot of people thought I made a bad decision, and maybe they weren't totally wrong, because I went a long time on and off without any money. Whereas if you're working for someone else, you do. So if you're not willing to bite the bullet, entrepreneurship isn't for you. If you're thin-skinned and you can't take a failure, and you can't take criticism, and not everybody wants to date you and give you money. And so, if you can't tolerate being rejected, if you fell apart because no one invited you to the junior prom, then entrepreneurship is
not for you. No, I think entrepreneurship is, as you said, and I think you always had it in you.
Well,
You always,
possibly.
because in the very early days, you went to the dark side. No one went from a postdoc to industry, and certainly not a female. Not that there were any jobs in academia for
Nobody,
females at
I mean,
that time either.
I took all of my classes with the medical school students, and I can tell you that 95% of those classes were male. Now, if I were 50 years younger now and entering medical school, more than half of the class is female
Yes.
because men want to go into finance. They don't want
Well,
to.
no, actually, that's not the reason. The
That's not
reason
it.
is,
What do you think it
no,
is?
that what happened years ago, I can remember hearing this and thinking, how is this going to impact the marketplace? Women were finishing high school at much larger rates
Yeah,
than men.
that's true.
Women were going to college where men were not. And I thought, oh, this is going to change of what it looks like in the marketplace because women are going to have advanced degrees. And that's exactly what's been coming. And certainly we see now, you were probably the only female CEO of your time, but now we have lots of female CEOs around.
Yes. I think one of the things that I find troublesome about the younger generation, however, is that, and I don't know where this came from, we were tough women. We were tough.
Oh, I'll tell you where it came from.
We were tough. I mean, none of us looked for safe places. None of us ran to HR and cried that
No,
some man insulted our integrity or our abilities.
well, you would have been
Just
kicked out of
figured out,
school.
we just figured out how to get even.
Yeah. That's the best. Just get even, right? And
Just
so
go in that men's room.
go in that men's room. You're not the first person, you're not the first female that has been in a men's room and would go into men's room early in the morning because that's where everybody met.
That's where they met.
So, up until the point that the female entered their space, and then they thought, oh no, we're not meeting here anymore. So I think you've answered all the questions. Anything else you'd like to sort of Jiminy Cricket our audience tonight?
Well, the only other thing I'd say about Jiminy Cricket is just because someone looks like a bug doesn't mean they don't have good advice for you. So listen to everybody.
Yeah, because out of the blue, right, that wonderful physician looked at you, female, and said, go to skin. And then you started making money and having jobs.
Yeah, we launched products. We've got a couple of other license deals in the works now. And so, I would like to think about retiring, but I'm afraid if I retire, I'll lose my edginess.
Well, that's a really interesting question for me to ask you and end on is, do you think you could turn off your science?
No, because I'm at an age now where I'm beginning to see a lot of my friends are getting sick and even family members are getting ill. And with all the new treatments out for a variety of disorders that when I was in school, we never thought would be treatable, it encourages me to read and keep up with the science. I had a foundation in immunology, which was skimpy relative to what the kids are coming out with now. But the one thing I have that they're not giving the kids in school anymore, that I think gives me an edge, is that I'm whole animal, whole human physiologist. They're not training that anymore in graduate schools. Everything is now a molecular tool, right? But it's the physiologist that knows the target and how that impacts the whole physiology. And so I oftentimes have friends who'll call me and ask me if I would be a patient advocate for them, with their doctor. They don't know what questions to ask. So maybe that'll be my next career.
And no doubt you'll build a company of advocates. Because it couldn't just be you.
No, and I think the quicker you retire, the quicker you die.
Yeah,
So
well, I think you need, I'm somebody who says you need a transition plan. As in life, we go through many, 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 right, transitions. You went from academia to Separacore, from Separacore to your own startup, from your startup to working with the people from Yale and launching 33, coming out with 33 patents and licenses or
in
whatever
fact,
those were.
I love talking to young grad students and postdocs because I want to hear what they're doing and how they're thinking about it.
Well, I think you've opened up a channel for people to reach out to you, Yael.
Oh,
I think
I need to go into a witness protection program?
maybe.
Stop.
I don't think you need witness protection. I think that you've had an extraordinary career. Just extraordinary. I mean, I've listened to, I've worked with thousands of scientists, not hundreds, not at 50, thousands and thousands of scientists. And, the paths are not always what everybody says they are, right?
Right.
Oh, you're going to get your PhD and you go directly to academia. Well, that's changed.
Oh, it's changed dramatically. I mean, I could never imagine myself staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning writing a grant for someone to cut into ribbons. I would much rather be up till 2 o'clock in the morning writing sections of a new drug application that will help someone.
Exactly. The transition, the transaction,
Yeah. Closer to the marketplace.
Closer to the marketplace.
Yeah. Yeah. I like being closer to the market.
Good.
Definitely.
And anything else you'd like to impart to the audience this evening?
This was a lot of fun.
Oh, I'm so glad. Let's hope it's helpful to people because I think you've had just a lovely, extraordinary career and still having a good time and still in science.
Still in science, yes.
And not able, even though everybody around you are thinking about retirement situations, you're just.
Well, I have to be honest with you. I did get back to playing golf. I did start playing golf again,
Good.
and I hurt my shoulder.
Oh, well, you see.
So I have to take it easy for another month and give my shoulder a little chance to heal. And then I do like hanging out at the beach periodically. To walking the dogs along the beaches is fun too. But you know what? You can only do that just so many hours of the day. And then you start meeting weird people who aren't doing anything but that.
And that's just not you. And I don't really think it's any scientist. I think that people are born into STEM. It just, you were probably playing STEM games as a kid or had a curiosity that was beyond.
My first toy that I really wanted was a chemistry set.
Thank
And
you.
then I wanted a microscope. And then I used to harass the family doctor by drawing blood from people and putting it under a microscope and asking him to show me how to do different stains. I was like 7 years old. I'd walk right into his office, right by the patients, knock on his office door and walk in. I'd say to him, Dr. Burke, I have a blood sample here. What stain should I use on it?
Oh, that was
a bunch of stains,
and that was it.
That was it.
And you never look back. And
No.
you never will look back.
Always interested in science.
Always. Well, clearly from that point, a 7-year-old, right? Which is very typical in the STEM community.
You hear this a lot, don't you?
Yeah, I can tell you 98% of the people that I work with in STEM, if I say, what I did to you, I get a story. Oh, I was a biologist. I was in the gardens with my grandmother, identifying plants,
And bugs.
looking at them and bugs or whatever that might be. I had somebody who said, in kindergarten, I built a robot. Another woman said to me one day, I learned to read at the age of 4, Sarah, and
Yeah.
I read my first physics book when I was 6 years old.
That's right. I was reading at the age of 4. Yeah.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Because the curiosity and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an absolute delight. Thank you so much,
Well, thank you for inviting
Dr. Yael Schwartz, for
your
your,
podcast.
well,
It's always fun.
it's always fun.
It is always fun.
It's always fun. And it's always fun to hear about careers that turned out well that had bumps along the road.
Oh, it's still bumping, by the way.
Good, as it should. Otherwise, you wouldn't be having any fun.
Well, I think I may drink to that. I may make myself a little cocktail and prepare dinner.
I think it's time. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks
Thank
again.
you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.